Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Motive, Social Motivation for the Creative Class. I'm your host, Tim Fulton. Our next featured creative this evening is Mr. Clinton Reno, poster artist. Clint, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Clint's been a poster artist here in Columbus, Ohio, and nationwide for 10 years now.
Yes.
Clint, talk about how you first got started doing poster art.
I was working at a textbook company down in German Village with a gentleman by the name of Chip Midnight, who had I think he at the time was writing for Moo magazine, and started his own sort of internet music thing. So he had me do caricatures of different bands that he would interview, and at the time, this was when MP3.com was starting, and this was the startup of. It was about the same time as the internet was starting.
Right.
I was not a pioneer.
This was like Prodigy, very early MySpace.
Yes.
Maybe Friendster.
No, I think it was prior to that even. This was all I don't even know what, the GeoCities or whatever. But so I would do characters of these bands, and nothing really ever came of it. But then I started about 2 years later. I was working at an agency, and my buddy was like, "You might want to check out MP3.com. One of the sketches that you did is up on one of the artist's profiles." And I took a look, and I'm like, "That's pretty crazy." And I contacted them, and I said, "I can make a much cleaner version of this for you." And the guy was like, "That'd be amazing." So I did that, and somehow just ended up working with this dude who I think was in California. And I started doing posters for him, none of which were ever used, oddly enough. But because I did that, Chip and I kept talking, and then along comes Robert Duffy of donewaiting.com. And Chip and he had become friends, and Duffy was kind of starting donewaiting.com, and he started putting on shows, and I started just kind of getting into these black and white flyers, and
So to be clear, at first this was all pro bono. This was all
oh yeah, absolutely.
You were just sure, I'll be the guy who makes the posters.
Yeah.
Can I get into the show for free?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that if I were starting now, I wouldn't have been able to do it because I don't have the time that I did then. So, or didn't need I didn't need the money as
To
much
be
as I
clear,
would
you
do
have
now.
a wife and 2 children
Yeah,
at
three
home.
now.
Excuse
we
me.
just
three.
had our third
Right.
6 weeks ago. So I had a lot more time on my hands and was able to do these things, mostly just for the exposure. So, yeah.
That's how you got started.
Yeah, that's about
Yeah,
how
and
it
so you've transitioned from that to doing a sort of, I hope this isn't an insult, a higher quality work that you a lot are selling as limited edition prints.
Yes.
You continued for a long time, primarily, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, primarily still doing concert poster art.
Yes.
And then that has transitioned since fairly recently into doing more fine art prints that are sort of your work, your inspiration.
Yep.
Can you talk about the difference that you feel in working from, well, it wasn't necessarily commissioned work, the concert posters, because you were the one, I assume, doing the outreach to be able to do it. Can you talk about the difference between sort of working it within that commercial atmosphere and working in a realm which is just for yourself / just for the people that are appreciating your work?
I think early on, I would seek out a lot of these opportunities, and so I had a little bit more of a say in what I would do because it was all on me. And a lot of times they're for local shows, and the artists or the bands or whatever, they didn't necessarily care what the poster was. They were just excited to have a poster created. So that was a little bit more open. And then I've kind of shifted into the concert posters I did for a while, whereas that was through the venue, and it was still kind of on me to create and come up with the ideas. So that was a little bit open as well.
But to be clear, there was an approval process to it.
Not really. Not early on.
Not back then.
No.
Okay.
Not early on. And that was okay because nobody was paying for it. So as soon as money starts changing hands, people obviously will want to have a say in things, which is perfectly understandable. So nowadays, what I do, anytime I do a rock poster nowadays, it's through much more official channels, be it the band management or bands now have merchandise managers and merchandise companies that they work with. So there's an approval process there, and it's a very, sometimes it's a very crazy approval process. Sometimes they're just like, do anything crazy, do anything cool, we'll be happy with it. So
How often are you still reaching out to them, and they're reaching out to you?
It is probably, I'll reach out to them from time to time, but I get much less from that than I do from being at events like Forecastle Music Festival. It's an amazing festival, but it's small enough that like a lot of the bands will walk around a lot of times, and
And by you getting out of it, you are talking about money.
yes,
Because the merch company will sort of take some of those prints and they'll sell them on their own.
yeah.
But then do you always have the right to sell some of your own work?
Yes,
Like,
that is actually generally what we want to try to do. There's been a couple cases where I haven't been able to, but that's like kind of like in the contract, so to speak, is I'll get paid to do it, I'll get paid to print it, and then I'm allowed to have like 25 or 40 or 100 to sell after the fact, after the show. So like I don't ever sell them prior to, because that takes away from the merch money for the bands. So.
I see. And so when you're at festivals and so you sell at Comfest, you sell at Forecastle, you go to, what's the national touring, the poster art festival?
They do flat stocks.
Flat
I've done
stock.
fewer of those.
Okay.
But then there are also craft fairs that kind of come across, like Renegade Craft Fair out in Chicago or Austin. There's a ton of those, and a lot of even craft fairs around here that pop up, Craft and Outlaws and things like that.
And those are I think you're quicker to do those simply because they're
Yes.
local, right?
Yeah.
So you primarily with those, you're simply dealing with your backstock, right? You're not.
Yep.
I mean, you're not producing for those.
No, it's from time to time I will create a print specifically for those events, but it's never a rock poster.
Right.
A lot
Like
of
you do a
people-
lot of work for the North Market.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's like sometimes people will come in and be like, "Oh man, will you do a Bob Dylan print for me?" And I'm like, "No, that's not how it works."
Right.
No. But
So talk about transitioning then into the work that is just for you.
so, and not even sure how it happened, but there has doing the gig posters and things like that. There have become more hoops that you have to jump through, and there are these galleries kind of popping up all over the country that are kind of like these pop culture galleries that are a little bit. They're catered more to the lowbrow type culture. They're not high end, but they're beautiful galleries. They're nice galleries, and they deal with amazing artists. But it's more for like a younger crowd, and they're popping up all over the country. So a lot of times they'll do these themed shows and a lot of these pop culture type things. Like I did a Fight Club poster, for example, for a glow in the dark theme. So there are these things that come up every once in a while, and I'll do these things more now because they will sometimes have things attached to them. Like they have properties attached to them that I don't necessarily own, but it's a lot more fun to kind of like just do something that doesn't have. With the gig posters, when people will walk into my booth, for example, there's so many different like things that they have to. A lot of times they'll come in and they'll be like, "Well, I love that band, but I wasn't at that show, or I don't live in that city, or actually I didn't even see that tour." Actually, I love the artwork, but I don't know that band. And there are just so many different things that make it tricky to sell this artwork to this person. So these pop culture galleries and doing things like that offer me an opportunity to like do kind of like anything, everything. And even with the recent show at Rivet last month, that was a song lyric show. And basically what it was is I just took like 10 songs that I was passionate about, and I'm like, it'd be fun to capture this in a way that, even if it's a literal translation of the song, which it's not meant to be taken literally, but it's fun to kind of like get it out there in a literal way, just so that someone can like have that emotional attachment to the artwork. And then if they have the song that they're attached to as well, that's like an added benefit to it. So, and those have been more fun for me, and they've ended up they end up doing better for me, like in terms of selling them or in terms of people reacting to them. The band posters, they a lot of times will get people in the booth because they like, oh, the Killers, oh, I love that poster. But then a lot of times they'll look around and they'll walk away with art prints, and that's kind of what I'm finding with like a lot of my peers. Like they still do these rock posters, but people are much more apt to buy artwork in essence.
Yeah. Let's shift a little bit and just talk about the commission work that you've done and sort of what that, I don't know how blessed you've been in that somebody's just like, hey, I need a poster for this event, do whatever you want to do. Or if it's a lot more sitting down and them giving you input, you coming to them with an idea and then saying, I don't like that. What's been the commission process like for you?
Well, I'll do a lot of commission work, and a lot of the times I make sure up front though that I ask them, I'm saying, you are obviously coming to me for a very specific reason. I have a specific style. It's a little strange. There's some quirkiness to it. This is not going to be something that's produced in an ad agency necessarily. This is something strange. So like I'm going to lead with the most strange thing I can come up with. And like we can whittle it down from there, but a lot of times if it's too much, if they want to like take too much out of it, a lot of times I'll back out because it's not like any sort of artistic integrity. It's more just not going to be fun.
Right, you're just not interested in doing it, right?
Yeah, and I've had the like the joke about make the logo bigger. That's happened, and even in a poster that I've been I did a couple for Guitar Center, I think, for their South by Southwest showcase, and I did 2 of them, and they're like, these are great, but could you make the logo bigger? So I had to like figure out a way to like shrink the artwork so that this logo really stood out. So.
But that you're willing to do because you're
Yep.
able to
Yes.
still contribute your creative expression in
Yes.
it, and you're just trying. In the end, you're talking to the person that's trying to appease the person that's above them,
Right.
And you realize that,
Right.
So, do you want to walk through your actual process?
Yeah, I could do that pretty quickly. And I will say, like, when I started, these were like black and white flyers. They were digital. I would go to Kinko's and print off 11 by 17s. And I went to a show at Stain Skin. I don't know if it's even still, but it was a show of Mike Martin, Engine House 13. He does these crazy day glow rock posters. He's been doing it for many, many, many years. And I introduced myself, and he was familiar enough with my work. He's like, oh, dude, those are great. He's like, listen, you got to stop. He's like, you have to print them yourself. You have to screen print these. And I looked into it a little bit, and so this process that you're about to see, and I have some posters back there, it's all screen printed, and a lot of this is like this kind of like the most important thing in a lot of terms of, with a lot of gig posters, is like if it's screen printed, if it's limited edition, if it's done by hand or done by whatever, like it's not. That's why I'm able. Like people will come in and they'll be like, "That's $40. Why is that $40?" And I'll like, "There's only 20 of them. There's only 20 of them. I'm not going to print these again. They're not. I didn't hit Command P. This is an actual thing I did with my hands. So I'll kind of walk you through what it takes to do that.
So this is the process.
You can't really see that, but I start off with a thumbnail.
We're totally washed out.
I have a quarter there for it, but I start pretty small so I can get my composition to where I really want it to go. Because if I go too big, I won't be able to get it there. So then I go into a tighter sketch with pencils, and I try to do as much of this by hand because there's a computer component to it, and I always feel a little guilty about that. So I do as much of by hand as I possibly can. So it's hand sketched, and then I'll ink it by hand, ink on this crazy vellum stuff. At which point in time I'll scan it in and take it into Illustrator, and it's all my line work. So I don't know how familiar anyone would be, but it live traces it. I might do some painting. A lot of times I've been working in some watercolor parts to it, again, to get as much by hand as I possibly can because the computer plays a role into it. So I'll scan that in. And I think, okay, so then this takes a long time. That was just a step. I wish I could take that would go that quickly. But so you could see a lot of some of the stuff. Like some of this area back here is the painting that you saw prior, and then that was the guy that you saw inked. So this all happens in the computer, and then after I do that, each color is um, pulled out from this poster, and you can I think there's like 5 of them here. So that's the first color, that's the second color, that's the third color. So I have to separate it in a way that the screen print, I lay down these colors, and the next slide might make, so then I print out these films, each color becomes a film because each color is going to be screen printed. So each color gets its own screen. So then I expose it, wash it out. Go ahead, you can do the next one. And wash it out. And then, so that's the screen. And then each color, so this is the gray, and I think that print might be on the top there. This is the gray, this is the blue, this is the white, the orange, and then the final color is the black. And so that's a 5-color print, and each color, if I'm doing 50 of these, I'll have to run each color that many times. I'll have to do 50 times, and I put them in this drying rack. So I'll assign a number down here. So I did 30 of these, for example, for that show.
And so what's the time, just the actual process, let's say post Illustrator, just the
actual manual labor?
Yeah, the printing of the screens, the washing out, the application of them.
It depends. I could do a run of 40 in about 20 minutes. So,
Okay.
But that's one color.
Okay.
So then that'll dry, and then that's a 5-color print. So, it'll take a while. It'll take a few days.
Certainly.
A lot of times.
Certainly.
I could do it in a night if I had to, but I don't like to.
Certainly. Any specific questions for Clint? I feel like we sort of glossed over some of the aspects of his.
Sorry
I feel
about
like
that.
no, it's my fault
Sorry.
that we've sort of glossed. Is there anything? I know a lot of people here appreciate his work. Is there any specific questions you have? It's okay if you don't.
Yeah.
You have a comment?
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you. And I started out using. I don't do it as much as I did when I started, but I started out using a lot of colored papers, and that was one way. And actually, the guy that taught me to do a lot of it, Mike Martin, he always gave me grief about it.
And there are a lot more of Clint's works back here that you can check out.
Yep.
But before that, if you guys could please give him a round of applause.